Greetings, everyone. I'm Eric Hansen, and on behalf of everybody here at OTT.X, I'm delighted to welcome you to this episode of OTT.X's videocast, The Buzz, where we offer up our online stage to a few of streaming industry's insiders to drop their version of the truth on us about what's going on, what it means, and what we should do about it in navigating the tumultuous waters of OTT streaming today. Before we turn things over to this episode's crew of Buzzcateers, I want to make sure to mention that you can find and subscribe to all episodes of The Buzz via podcast on Spotify. Just search for OTTX. Be sure to follow us so you'll be notified about future episodes as well. We'll drop the Spotify link into the podcast into the chat so you'll be able to get into that easily. So, presiding over today's panoply of pontificators, we're excited to welcome our moderator, Colin Dixon, founder and chief analyst of nScreenMedia. Joining Colin today, we have Jason Cohen, chief executive officer at MyBundle TV, Tony Gunnarsson, principal analyst, TV, video, and advertising at Omdia, Greg Smith, founder and chief executive officer at StreamVantage, and Bill Sondheim, president and chief executive officer at Greenfield Media, as well as Paul Colichman. Welcome, Paul, Chief Executive Officer at Here Media. We're so glad you're all here.
Thank you very much, Eric, and welcome everybody. And thank you, Paul, Greg, Tony, Jason, and Bill for joining us. We have a cornucopia of topics to discuss this morning. I don't know that we'll get through them all, but one of the things I'd like to encourage you to do is to enter questions. So if you have a question, there is a Q&A window down there. Pop it in there, and if appropriate, I'll slot it in as we go along. And introduce yourself on the chat. Say hi to your fellow listeners and fellow participants. I'm sure they'd love to pass their own comments about what we're talking about this morning or this afternoon or wherever it is that you are watching us. So I want to kick us off with a topic that I don't think has really gotten very much traction in the media. And that is the fact that both Netflix and Roku have unilaterally decided to stop reporting how many people are using their services and how much revenue those people are generating for them services. So this was a bit of a shock when Netflix made the announcement a couple of quarters ago, and Roku made the same announcement in their quarter just ended earnings call. And I don't know about you, but pay TV cable systems have been judged forever on these metrics, on the number of subscribers they have and on the amount of money each of those subscribers generate. How are we going to manage without this data? Bill, why don't you jump in first?
Well, I think a few things. First, I tend to agree that it's very helpful to have these very well-known metrics. And we're very used to counting subscribers and ARPU, which is the average revenue that's generated per user. And those are helpful metrics, I think. And I think they still remain helpful. And so I understand some of the unease with losing them from Netflix. But let's look at what's really happening underneath and why that was motivated. The fact of the matter is that Wall Street has dramatically shifted its focus away from pure growth into profitable growth. And the numbers that we're looking at when you look at just subscribers and ARPU don't tell you any of that profitability. And so, frankly, Netflix benefits from focusing now, shifting to profitability, because they're one of the only streaming sites that is profitable. So it's really going to work to their agenda and to Wall Street's overall focus, which is to better understand what's the cost of all of this content versus the revenue you're generating. So it's understandable why Netflix has done it. They're in a position to benefit more than other companies, frankly, at this stage. But I do also understand from years of being able to track just these gross indicators, the number of subs, I'll miss hearing that. One other quick point. Netflix is going to stop growing pretty soon. So all the more reason that they say, when they were growing millions a quarter because they were in particular expanding internationally, it was very exciting news. It's going to become less and less thrilling. Another reason they probably have shied away for it and are pivoting toward profitability focus.
Okay, so Bill doesn't think it's that big a deal. Greg, what do you think?
Well, first, full disclosure, I'm a Netflix shareholder and a pretty happy one at that. But just, general instincts are, look, when you're tracking revenue, it's back to economics 101, you've got, units and price. And so the more transparency you can get if you're on the street or as an investor, the better. So I don't really I can actually see them reverting. Or in Roku doing the same. Yeah, I agree with you, Bill, from the standpoint that probably unit or essentially, user growth sub growth is not going to be there as much. Also, these businesses are getting more diversified. ARPU is being driven not just by sub revenue, but also by advertising revenue and so forth. And I think they'll actually probably, start maybe splitting that out as well. But I think that the bigger trend is just transparency always trumps opacity, in my opinion, with respect to value and valuation, unless you're really trying to hide something. So I think it's best for Netflix and Roku to probably revert, and we'll see if there's enough of a backlash. I mean, when Netflix originally made that announcement, if I could be wrong, but I believe that their stock went down about 45% the next day. So yeah, exactly. So it kind of says, I'd rather have that 5% back with them reporting those metrics. So we'll see what happens.
Tony, what do you think? I came up with a couple of scenarios when I looked at some Comcast data where if I didn't know what was going on with subscribers and ARPU, I wouldn't have caught early indication of the rapid decline in their video services. So can you break the tie? Greg says, yeah, he would like it. Bill thinks that we can get by without it. What do you think?
Yeah, so full disclosure, I'm an analyst. I work for a company that, it's been the source of truth, looking at Netflix reported number over a decade. No doubt we will figure out a way to do so moving forwards without them actually reporting the numbers. But yeah, no, growth for Netflix has already stalled. A couple of going back the years, we were used to double-digit growth. In some cases, obviously starting from really small base, triple-figured growth every quarter and so on. And we're firmly in the single-digit growth era for SVOD overall. We spent most of today reviewing some of the companies that reported, and it's very small growth figures currently. So it makes sense that they aren't going to focus so much on reporting subscriptions. But yeah, it's a change, and I think this reflects more the fact that we are. Actually, I've been writing about arguing that streaming is now mature now for the last 5 years, but it's a symptomatic sort of point of how far we've gone. But I still think we're early days in streaming. The final how content being delivered over the internet is going to look like. It's still being developed. So, but yeah, as a first stage, growth has now reached lower single digits on a quarterly basis, and yeah, it makes sense not to report them. I wish they wouldn't, because it would make my life, I wish they would continue to report the numbers, because it would make my day job so much easier.
Yeah, yes, indeed. Paul, you any thoughts?
Well, I look at the Roku side of this a little bit more than the Netflix, because they both announced it together. And I view, all services, of course, Netflix is in a league of its own, but all services, including Netflix, at their core are publishers. And all services, including Netflix, are starting to focus on ad revenue in ways they never did before. And Roku very, very heavily, and you'll find many other publishers are focused exclusively on their ad revenue. What I think this move anticipates, is what happened to traditional digital publishers about 5 years ago, which is it starts to become very uncomplimentary to view your revenue per subscriber. Because when you have so many impressions available, so many, right? A lot of them don't get filled. And if they do get filled, they get filled at embarrassingly low CPMs. So if you're a very big provider, such as these two, among the biggest in the world, you really want people to focus on your overall revenue number as opposed to an ARPU number. It's gonna serve you better, because there is a significant chance that for the ad-supported subscribers, right, which Netflix has a mixed model. Roku is much more heavily dependent on ad revenue. The ARPUs will drop because there's way too many impressions right now, and it's the oldest economic rule in the book: supply and demand. There's a ton of supply. There's somewhat less demand. And the bigger publishers, such as Netflix, will get the higher CPMs. I think en masse, they'll still look pretty good given the enormous size of their audience and their ability to get the highest CPMs in, the space. And everyone else will suffer more. Roku, I think, will suffer more. Less desirable audience. And then go down the list from there. So that's my thought.
Yep. Jason, unless you do you have any thoughts on this? Because I wanted to move on to our next topic, but quickly on this one.
Yeah, quickly. I'll take actually a completely different tact on this one. So they both are stop reporting these numbers because the growth is done with those numbers. However, Roku, I actually think, has a spectacular opportunity, and that's why they stopped reporting this number. If you think about the $50 billion still spent on linear television advertising a year, Roku believes it's all moving to streaming. I personally believe it's all moving to streaming also. And Roku has a tremendous opportunity for all those people who have Rokus attached to their TV. As those people cut the cord, stop watching live TV, watch more stuff on their Roku, Roku will make more money. But they're not going to grow active accounts. And so what they took the hit, they took that, again, stock got walloped pretty good, partly because, wait a second, why are you reporting these numbers? It's because there's not going to be any more growth in those numbers. And I think Roku realizes for the long haul, they just want to transition people, the street's focus, onto the massive opportunity ahead and not focus on volumes of households, would be my thought there.
Colin, if I can just add one thing that's interesting about what Jason just said, which is not one of the topics that you gave us that we would discuss, but what happens to the connected TV market? Because Roku, in part, benefits immensely from having the stick that enables it to be a major platform for people to use to get onto the web, internet. And yet we're hearing that more and more people are converting over to their connected TV, and that's increasingly becoming the way people are surfing the net. So I'll be curious to hear how he thinks that will impact Roku going forward.
Indeed. So let's talk. Let's move to our next topic. I wanted to talk about bundles. They've been in the news a lot. Disney, a little bit earlier this year, announced a bundle with Max. Very unusual to have a competitor bundle like that in the market. But we're also seeing other bundles like Paramount Plus is free to Instacart members. I think it's Walmart Plus members get access to Peacock. So there are lots of different types of bundles out there. Are we done with bundles? Are we going to continue to see more and different types of bundles? Jason, why don't you kick us off on this one?
Yeah, I definitely don't think we've seen. I think that's in the first inning. My personal view is it makes sense. Like the one rule for those in the streaming industry should just be like, just throw out the words, well, that's not how we've done it before, right? And sort of be open to new ideas, which they are, right? You mentioned Instacart, Walmart Plus. I believe that broadband, and it's not just I believe it, we have some data that backs it up, is that consumers are looking to their broadband providers to be the one assisting with the bundles, and not necessarily the streaming services getting together and building some sort of system. Like, that's just not the way marketplaces usually work. You usually need a third, more independent party. Obviously, I'm biased because that's what we do. But ultimately, I think broadband, you're going to see a bigger and bigger play with especially smaller, but even the larger broadband providers into next year, making it a key part of the same way that T-Mobile and Verizon on the mobile side, every day there's another streaming service you get for free. That's coming to a broadband provider near you into next year. So I think we'll see more and more of that into next year and the year beyond.
Very good. But one interesting thing was, I noted that Netflix made the comment in not the last earnings call, but the earnings call before last. I think Craig Peters, co-CEO there, said they don't really need to do bundles. Do they need to do bundles?
At least from my perspective, it's not necessarily a need, because they are in almost every bundle. So they're right, they don't need to do bundles. But consumers, think about it from the consumer's perspective, it's all a mess, right? It's the whole ecosystem is a tremendous mess. And making it easy to subscribe, bundle, resubscribe, pause, like there's a lot more work certainly to be here. And so Netflix will probably say they don't need to do anything, but they are in many, many, many bundles. And so I think you'll see more of that.
I agree.
Tony, what do you think?
Sorry.
Yeah, so I think what he said was, in the US, we don't need to be part of a standalone streaming bundle, which makes sense if you're in, what is it, 75% of households or something like that. There's no need, right? But yeah, Jason's absolutely correct. Netflix is already being bundled left, right, and center internationally on a global level, through pay TV providers, mobile phone providers, and broadband providers. But I think bundling, I think one of my the things that I've been writing on at work for 2025 is the expectation that we're going to see more standalone streaming bundles. It seems like, based on, from what I see in here, both from clients and in the industry, it's like that Warner Brother, Discovery, and Disney bundle in the US looks like it could be the first truly engaging or actually attractive offer. If you look at the details, like $15 per month and you get free competitive services from Netflix with advertisement. It's true. If you go ad free, it's a little bit more expensive, over $30 per month.
Not a little bit.
But bear in mind that SVOD services have become a lot more expensive than what they were at launch. Netflix launched at, what was it, $4.99 in the US per month for streaming?
That's right. That's right.
It's insane. Today it's a lot more expensive. But I think my point is this: I think everyone's just waiting to hear, is that partnership between Warner Brother, Discovery, and Disney, is that successful? Which partner is it benefiting the most? Who's making the most money out of that? And I predict that we're going to see a lot more of these type of bundles internationally, certainly next year, probably domestically in the US as well.
Anybody else have any thoughts on what we're going to see in bundling in the next year?
I would just add that there's different kinds of bundling. The kind you see with Instacart, where it basically becomes a sponsored subscription. That's an old publishing trick. And having owned many magazines, people wanted to have sponsored subscribers because it boosted their numbers for advertisers, so they could get better advertisers into their ecosystem. So Netflix aside, which Netflix and Amazon I consider in a league of their own, for someone who wants to focus on more impressions for their ad-supported streaming service, I could see how sponsored subscribers like those coming from Instacart might make some sense.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree with Paul. I think there'll be a few for those smaller services, the more specialized services. There'll be a lot more, still just the ability to get that marginal audience, they'll do a lot of bundling, and I think that'll be creative. It's interesting, just moments of, like, literally an hour ago, I'm moving this weekend, and I was signing up for Wi-Fi service, and of course this Wi-Fi service actually had cable TV. I've cut the cord 15 months ago, and I had the opportunity to kind of go back. And they had 3 bundles for cable television, and they were just so completely not what I wanted. I actually was willing to get cable TV, but they only had 3 bundles, and one started at $35, which had almost nothing that I was interested in, and then the one I was interested in had $85 a month, which I was like, that's still too expensive for me, for my taste, etc. It just kind of shows, even on the cable's dying to try to get new subscribers. I mean, dying. And they're not doing enough bundling. So I think that'll happen with streaming for sure.
So do you think one of the things that Charter is barreling down the road on is getting agreements with the content providers, with the broadcast providers, to bundle in their SVOD apps, and it's being very successful, and it says it's going to have 9 apps, 9 SVOD services at the lowest tier, the ad-supported tier, bundled in for its select customers by early next year. They already have Disney, they already have Paramount Plus, and VIX are bundled in there. Looking at their numbers, I don't see it's made any difference at all on cancellations. Will it get, when they get to 9, is this going to save pay TV? Is this going to save cable TV for them?
There is no saving cable TV at this point. And the fact is that I do believe bundles are going to become an incredibly important element going forward. I think this panel has exactly nailed it. It's not going to include things like Netflix, or if it does, Netflix will be getting like the ESPN deal. They'll be getting a lot of the share of the total, but it's going to make a lot of sense to Disney and to Max and Paramount Plus, channels that each on their own have a lot to offer, but not enough that you don't churn in and out. And they're seeing that churn. And once we get a bundle that has got enough value to it, I can tell you a lot of consumers will go back to the simplified life they like and just stay with that. And that's going to be motivation. Netflix isn't going to have to pitch in much of its revenue to get into that bundle, because they have to be in that bundle or the bundle is no good. But the other players that we mentioned, they are heavily motivated, in my estimation, to get into that bundle and to encourage that bundling activity.
Yes, indeed. Okay. Let's jump to another topic, which I think, when I think about this topic, it is the thing that has consumed the most airtime over the last 6 months than any other topic, and that's AI. We saw a little hint of Gen AI being used by Amazon. Amazon is now using Gen AI to generate series summaries and show summaries, and they claim that they'll be able to go right up to the minute of what you've watched already, provided you've done the watching inside of Prime Video, I guess. That there won't be any spoilers, and that it's a great way of catching you up with what's going on in the show, rather than you having to rewatch and spend all that time rewatching the content. So, good use of AI, Paul?
Good news. It's the news. And it's news that is rolling out. It's impossible to know who it's good for or who it's bad for. You just know that it's happening, and it's happening at an incredibly rapid clip. And what you just described is a very early use of AI. AI, it is possible that in the not very distant future, it's actually creating the content for you. So it's not just getting you to a streamer and catching you up on what they've produced for you, but actually doing it for you. You'll notice that people are getting away from the interactive shows. That was a thing for a little while, and I think it was officially killed today by Netflix and a couple of other people. And that's because AI is going to do that work for them. And they're also very focused, the bigger streamers, on AI and gaming, because keep in mind that a lot of the consumers now really prefer gaming content to video content. So what can AI do? Well, virtually anything. And soon, as far as creating images, people will be able to customize their own movies. I mean, it's really going to be out there. So what it's exactly going to be, no one can tell you right now, but you know it's coming very, very quickly.
So you just said something there that just really piqued my interest, Paul. I didn't know that Netflix has made a public statement that they're backing away from interactive content. I thought that they had a big hit with the Black. What was it? What was the show? I forget the show now. But they had very interactive.
Black Mirror.
Apparently not a big enough hit.
Well, apparently not a big enough hit. But if you've got AI and AI knows my likes, it can choose the path through that content to pick the story that will be most engaging for me.
It can also create the story and the video imagery for you. You don't need to pick one of 5 choices. It will, as it gets to know you, and it will get to know you better than you know yourself. I mean, that is the truth of the matter, is if you're really interacting with the AI shortly, it will know you better than you know you. And it will be able to give you exactly what you want, and it will create that image for you. So it's the ultimate in interactivity as it merges with your brain. But that is where we're going for gaming in particular, and for video content in general. No one knows the exact time frame, but these capabilities already exist. So it's not science fiction anymore. It's a question of rollout.
So Tony, I wanted to ask you about this topic. One of the things, like you, I'm an analyst. I kind of struggle with how to think about AI's impact on the ecosystem that both of us cover so closely. I'm fascinated to hear your opinion. How are you dealing with this, with all of the impacts that AI and Gen AI is and will continue to have on the entertainment industry?
Yeah, so I mean, I agree with what Paul said. I feel like personally a little bit threatened by all of this rapid change, but but what we do is we cover it as news. When there's a use case, I reviewed a paper that a colleague had written the other week. They're talking about different sports, broadcast TV, sports, using AI to enhance the viewing pleasure of sports through various stats on the and facts on top of the video. That sort of thing. I've heard about in Asia where they have AI news anchors reading out the news on a channel. I think it was Malaysia. Examples like that. So we cover it, but it's certainly not at the point where it's becoming a topic for our clients, from us, certainly, in its own right. We haven't yet added a TV and video AI intelligence service as Omdia, but perhaps in the future there will be something like
that. Will happen. That will happen. Yeah, I think I saw some analysts, or maybe it was a consultancy. They were forecasting billions and billions of dollars impact from AI. I get really mixed messages from when I speak with content providers, really mixed messages. Some are all in, some are wait and see, some are scared that it's going to eliminate a lot of the jobs in the production cycle. It makes it very, very difficult to think about the full impact when it seems to have such a broad impact across everything, right?
To me, just to jump in, it's like Uber with the mobile phone revolution. Who would have necessarily thought how much Uber is ingrained in our world? Even just going, Paul, you just saying what you said before, it got me thinking, like, maybe it's not the AI creates from scratch, a movie like you put in a prompt, but what if, a studio shoots a movie, shoots a TV show, and then AI has 7 alternate endings. right? So it takes all that acting, it takes all the speech. Like we've all seen the deep fake videos of Donald Trump saying whatever the person makes it. Is it going to a place where the six of us all see different versions of a movie, or we can watch it again and say, what happens if he doesn't die in this scene, and the rest happens? So I do think it's kind of cool. It's not nobody. I think nobody yet knows what it's going to look like, but it's certainly going to look different into the future than it did in the past, I think.
I imagine it would be applied for advertising first, serving you up advertising based on your, preferences and so on. That would probably be less capital heavy than filming a film's ending 6 times or 14 times, whatever it might be.
I know.
It's already happening.
Go ahead,
on
Greg.
the advertising side. I mean, ultimately, both the creation of the ads, as well as even think about the programmatic bidding that's going on. So this is also complex and requires a lot of manual work. It can all be done through AI, both on the supply side as well as on the buy side. So each one of those models are going to be essentially kind of getting smarter between the two of them. But there still will be efficiency as well. So it's very exciting. And I'll add one other thought here too. I remember being at the OTT.X summit, and one of the topics was discoverability. Through the 500 channels. Before we went into the buzz session, we talked about the fact that we've gone from maybe about 300 fast channels to about 500 fast channels in your average fast service. That's a lot. And how do you decide, what to view? I think AI is a perfect example of like saying, hey, it turns out based on my viewing behaviors, there are really 5 or 7 that really matter, and providing that kind of intelligence and recommendation. I think that'll be a game changer, and that's a good thing for all of us in the fast and AVOD space.
Yeah. One of the areas that it is certainly being applied in advertising. I was talking to a company the other day that they're using AI to get the tone of every scene. So, and they're applying that to advertising so that advertising can pick a version of an ad that is congruent with the tone of the show, and seeing a huge uplift in attention and action. So clearly something that we're going to see a lot more of in the not too distant future. So let's move on to another topic that I think is a very popular one here on Buzz, and a very popular one on the conference circuit, and that is fasts. So fasts continue to add channels. I have been keeping an eye on the top providers, and the top providers all have over 500 channels these days. So it's a lot of channels, but they continue to add them, which is something I think which is amazing in itself. When I talk to some content providers, I hear them talking about the platforms. The platforms are really trying to focus on the content that they consider to be premium, and pushing out some of the smaller providers. And that leads me to really wonder, are there still opportunities in FAST for smaller providers? Is there an opportunity there? Paul, what do you think?
Well, I think that whether it's a FAST channel, or whether it's a SVOD channel, or whether it's a television network, one principle remains consistent. Exclusive programming that people want to see will drive viewers to you. So when you see 500 FAST channels on a given platform, from the platform's perspective, they don't really care. They'd like to have 1,000 FAST channels if they could, because their job is to sell the ads, right? So they want to have as many choices as possible. They take their money off the top. They're not paying for the content. They don't care. So more is more from their perspective, right? Doesn't mean that the content owners are making money. Doesn't mean that the FAST channel's making money. But if you're the platform and you sell the ads, you're making money off the top. Whether channel number 59 has only sold 1,000 ad impressions today and channel number 32 has sold 100,000 is irrelevant to you, right? Yeah. You don't care.
Yeah.
So that's why I think there's going to be a lot more fast channels out there from a perspective of an individual ecosystem. Now, that is different than looking at it from the individual fast channels point of view. Right now, a lot of these fast channels all have versions of the same content on them. You'll see the same older content on dozens in many cases.
Baywatch.
Or you just have to use a service like Film Hub that places it on, any service that wants it for a rev share. This stuff is all available everywhere. On some level, it makes it all valueless. So to answer part of your question, exclusive original content that people can't find anywhere else but on your channel, I think will continue to be valuable as long as it's decent.
Yeah.
Paul, I mean, I'm going to disagree with Paul, and I know that we love a little controversy, so let me throw it out there.
Okay.
I think that the day that the fast channel opportunity was a tremendous short-term opportunity for independent producers and content owners. It allowed us to create niche-oriented little channels, but at the end of the day, I do not believe that there's anywhere near the volume of consumers needed to ultimately support those channels. So I believe economically, a tsunami is coming for the independents. And I have also heard more and more, like from platforms like Pluto, that have said, we are not going to keep adding channels, a little different than what Paul is saying, because at a certain point, we actually overwhelm our consumer to the point where they tune out. So we're going to try to focus the number of fast channels we have on major brands. So if you're the NFL or Major League Baseball, yeah, you're going to get a fast channel. But if you're a sailing guy with great videos that can produce new videos every month, you're not going to wind up continuing to have the placement opportunities that have been in existence up to now. And more, the demands on data analysis, on manipulating your schedule, on dealing with advertisers and getting more advertising revenue in, is creating additional resource constraints that these smaller revenue channels are just not going to ultimately be able to support. So I do believe that in the next year or so, we're going to start to see some significant failures of those channels. Either the platforms are going to kick them out, or they're going to realize that the individual operators, that they just are not making enough money, and that they'd rather put their content and license it on someone else's fast channel than try to operate their own.
Let's push on that idea just a little bit. So you mentioned sailing. There's a lot of sailors in the United States. There's a lot. And one of the things that the internet has always done extremely well is connect together quite significant but very spread out groups into addressable markets, right? That's addressable groups. Why can't we do this here? Why doesn't that work here?
Well, it is to a degree, but it's a matter of scale. And that's where, even though there are a lot of sailors out there, are there 500,000 to 600,000 sailors that are willing to, on a regular basis, be visiting that channel to give it ad support? That I'm not sure that that's the case. And so I'm a lover of bike riding. I love the Tour de France. But I don't believe that long term, and there's a lot of people out there that love riding and love team riding, but I don't think there's enough to support an ongoing station just dedicated to that content.
And I actually don't disagree with Bill at all. So we don't really have a lot of controversy. We're looking at just a different part of the continuum. I think Bill is completely right. And the reason I think Bill is right is that those channels cannot generate enough money to survive. There's only so much ad revenue, and even if you get 100% of what's over in broadcast and cable coming to you, it's not enough, because you have an unlimited number of impressions right now. And I spent 10 years selling advertising when I owned my own magazines. I sat moment to moment with these advertisers. They will grind the prices down. They will get what they want. They will get the best audiences, and the people who can deliver them the most nuanced audiences will get their money. that is not going to be an independent 99% of the time. There may be an exception here and there. It's not going to be an independent. So it's going to, I believe Bill is 100% correct. And I wanted a controversy, Bill. I apologize. I'll try to be controversial in some other way, but not in this way. I think that he is correct, that there is a tsunami of AVOD fast channel failures on the horizon simply because of the advertising ecosystem. And the reason I think this is, sadly, as a digital publisher, and I sold my digital publishing in 2017, thank God, all right, when it was still valuable. But I watched what happened to Vice. I watched what happened.
Yeah.
I can give you BuzzFeed, these things that were valued at billions. I watched what happened when essentially everyone realized there was way more impressions than anybody wanted to buy, and the impressions were not very valuable. And even if you were enormous, you were valueless. So it's the digital publishing industry is the canary in the coal mine for fast channels. And then you add to that our last discussion about AI, and that's just a whole other big question mark. But I also want to add to the whole thing you said about sailors. No one likes a sailor more than I do, especially lonely. Fleet Week is my favorite holiday of the year, so I'm all for the sailors.
Greg.
Yeah.
Actually, let me pitch a slightly different question to you, Greg. So they talked about a tsunami of failure of fast channels. Are we going to see a tsunami of failures of fast platforms? I noticed DirecTV jumped in yesterday. They have my free DirecTV. I took a look at the platform yesterday. It looked kind of hopeless to me. There was like 60 or 70 channels, no big brands to speak of. Can a platform like that really survive in this market?
Yeah. My sense is, I mean, I talk to advertisers all the time and, address, let's say, about a dozen of the major platforms. And ultimately, there are about maybe 20 that I always like to say that kind of matter. I just don't think there's room for anybody else, to be honest. And candidly, even some of those platforms are already hurting right now. Mm-hmm. So I think there is, and again, that also goes back to kind of the discussion of the number of fast channels. I have to opine here because I feel like this is what I do at StreamVantage every day, is we kind of fight for the small guy, and put them front and center. And there is opportunity. It is still, I don't want to take it away. I mean, it's an exciting time for content developers to come up with new creative ideas. But I think to Paul's point and Bill's point, it's tough out there. It's super tough. And ultimately, I think if you're going to be a content developer in the fast space, you also have to think about advertising. It's not just about the content. Look at the folks who are, I wouldn't even call succeeding necessarily, but certainly maintaining. Generally, they're coming from a larger media company. Roughly about 35% of fast is from news companies. And if you kind of look at the way they're set up, they'll have their kind of top, talent on the broadcast channel, and then they'll essentially have kind of newer talent on the fast channels as well. So it's a kind of a farm system, so to speak, for them to kind of manage their talent, and they're basically getting the ad buys, which is critically important too. So in the upfronts, they can basically do the linear channel stuff as well as the fast channel wrapped up in one, and that's a huge advantage. So, I'll say one last thing, and that is just that I think kind of these single IP channels are going to die on the vine. They're probably the first ones to go. And ultimately, I see this kind of getting mashed together. Instead of just watching the Carol Burnett show, we're just going to watch kind of more like the 70s rerun shows, that sort of thing. And I don't think there's any kind of harm there. They serve their purpose, particularly during during COVID. But ultimately, there's just, that's kind of tailing out. And I do see that decreasing. But I don't see any more fast channels or fast services platforms really evolving. There might be one or two, but they'll be more the exception than the rule.
Yeah. So, okay. So if some of them are going away, who's going to go away? Jason, Who do you think is going to survive? And I'll ask you as well, Tony, after Jason's opine. Which fast services are going to survive and why?
Yeah, well, again, maybe to take a different side of it, I think the problem is, or the reason why they're not going away, and the reason why we're adding more channels is the cost, right? The cost is next to nothing, right? To build a channel, to run a channel. If the costs were tremendously high, you would see these channels go away faster, right? So it's almost like people might not watch them. They might not make money, but something needs to kill them, right? And if it's not economics, so what is it? Similar to like the DirecTV is not going to live, die, or anything by their fast channels. Their fast channels are nice to have. They have 2 million customers and growing on the streaming side. Why would DirecTV let or cede that viewer's time to one of the other fast platforms? It's cheap to launch, and we might as well launch a fast platform. So I don't know. My thought is there's actually a tremendous opportunity to pull together everything we've just been talking about of like, there's too many channels and it's hard to find something to watch, and AI. Well, it feels like there's an opportunity for somebody to build personalized channels across a multitude of channels on a one-to-one basis. And somebody will do it, right? I mean, my bundle has our own fast platform. It's not something we focus on. Why did we do it? There needs to be a why. Because we're working with all these broadband providers, right? We work with 280 broadband providers across the US and growing, and they don't have to do anything. As we build out the content on our fast platform, they can turn around to their customers and be like, hey, and we've got free TV. And these are consumers who aren't streaming yet. So for us, are we going to thrive or die based on our fast platform? No. Is it expensive to run it? No. And so I think that's where, until it becomes more expensive to actually participate in the industry, you just won't see the fall off, I guess. Or it'll be slower and it will be clogged and it will still be a big market, in my opinion.
Yeah. Tony, what do you think? Who's going to survive this?
Well, so it's going to be those with a big brand, strong brand like Pluto TV. They are. I have the misfortune to view fast from the perspective of Europe, where the broadcasters serve the function of fast services. Broadcaster catch-up services on the internet across most European markets will have linear channels. They will have catch-up, and why would you need fast then? And Europeans do love their broadcasters. So, but even so, Pluto's made moves in Europe. They're following long sequence of strong US brands, Netflix, Blockbuster, you name it. Pluto is part of that sort of thing, and it could play a role even in Europe because of that branding. It's like the next new thing from the US. I think Samsung TV Plus and the likes of them that have, and Roku that have a device that is, you turn it on and you have a fast service essentially that starts off. That's a good way to survive, I think.
Yeah. To me, it seems like, I think I agree with you. If you have a constituency, so Samsung TV Plus, for example, it's the default service on those TVs. They seem to be in a pretty good position. And incumbents, people that were there first, like Tubi, Pluto TV, they seem to be in a pretty solid position. What about the opportunity for niche? We haven't really seen niche fast services that everybody wants to be general, right? Everybody wants to have everything. Well, what about if you started one that was specifically for one particular large demographic? So this is actually something that, now I think about it, Philo is beginning to do. Philo doesn't do news. It doesn't do sports. It does entertainment, and it's now building out a fast service, which is really focused on entertainment. Is that possible? Could that be successful, Paul? I see you shaking. You're nodding your head.
Well, I'll make a bold and statement at the top, and then I'll try to give a brief description of why I feel this way. I believe that niche fast channels are doomed. Okay. So, but when I talk niche, I talk niche. When you say something like entertainment, that's not niche to me, right? That's a big, broad area. And when I hear about Pluto or Tubi, these are owned by major studios. They're essentially platforms. Okay. I'm not worried about the studio-owned platforms, right? I mean, there was an early opportunity when independents got into Tubi, and then it got bought. Some people made some money early on and all that as they were basically getting content for nothing from content providers and splitting with them. But the platforms will be fine. They'll pick and choose whatever is out there that works for them, and that may change from time to time. The individual fast channels, the people who have to provide those channels to Pluto, right, or Samsung or the likes, there is one very expensive part of those channels, and it's not running the channel. I mean, that's absolutely correct. That's not the problem. It's the content. So content's really expensive if you want good quality, exclusive, original content. I run a niche SVOD service. I could never survive as an AVOD. And I must tell you, I have some of the best advertising relationships in the business, and I could never survive as an AVOD. The economics just don't work. And I will tell you, even for an SVOD like myself, I spend so much money on content that it shocks me sometimes. I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? Stop. But content's very expensive. Has it gotten a little cheaper with AI? Yeah, it's coming a little cheaper. Editing's a little cheaper. You can get music for a little bit less, but it's still super expensive. So I just don't feel like the economics are there for a niche AVOD to be able to afford enough of their premium content to draw enough of an audience to make enough money to make it work.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that they won't last for a very long time on the Vine, on the Plutos and Samsungs and Rokus of the world, and Amazon of the world. They'll live out there. And Amazon, to some extent, well, they got rid of Freevee this week as well. They kind of repackaged it as part of Prime. There's going to be a lot of reconfiguration of all of this. But at its core, there's one principle, and it's the same principle that Condé Nast and BuzzFeed and everyone else learned in digital publishing. The advertising pool is only so big. It's going to go to the most premium content it can get. It will likely go to the biggest providers because they have the best content, and they can also beat everybody else on price. So it's a very difficult world for niche fast channels. I don't predict good things.
Yeah.
Hey, Colin, one example of where we might see it in an ecosystem that can survive is YouTube, because in a way they started in a sense in a fast channel format. And the reality is that you can still create your own subscription channel, which is a weird term because it's not a subscription, it's an advertising channel, but you can do that. And maybe in that environment, you'll be allowed to survive and figure out how you can do the economics. I'm not sure, it's not easy, but it won't be the platform that kicks you off. I believe in Pluto's instance, it'll be the platforms that kick you off. They are going to want to narrow their focus. But YouTube is a very interesting place that I think all of us as executives need to be focusing on more and more. I think the ecosystem they're creating and the way young demographics are living on that ecosystem is a threat long-term unless we figure out better ways to fully monetize that.
I'm so glad you brought that up,
Sorry,
Bill, because as Paul was talking about the future for the super niche stuff, YouTube, I think, is a place where that stuff can flourish. And I wouldn't say can, I'd say is flourishing. And on aggregate, it is tremendously valuable to consumers. Look at the success of YouTube on TV. Over 10% of TV time now in the US, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. The most popular channel on TV today in the United States is YouTube.
And it's misleading to say it's a younger oriented. I have a former client that is a fitness personality that has 5 million subscribers to her channel. And she runs it herself, and she is generating significant monthly ad revenue from that channel. And she appeals to older, extremely overweight demographics. So it's not just the 20-year-old that's going to YouTube at this point.
Yep. Yep. Paul, final thoughts?
Well, for every Mr. Beast who is, making a small fortune on YouTube, I will tell you, influencers can sometimes do it because they are the cost of their content, right? If someone's an influencer and has 5 million followers and basically the cost of the content is them and some, lights and cameras, you can do fine. If you're trying to make what we consider, normal story form content or even reality TV content at budgets that we're used to seeing on channels we're used to seeing, you cannot make a living on YouTube, right? YouTube's going to do great. YouTube's going to do great. YouTube's going to be huge. And everything Google touches, they do pretty well. Our fastest growing channel, part of our service right now is our YouTube TV channel. It's growing like Topsy. But that's, YouTube TV is different than YouTube itself. YouTube TV is a cable alternative, essentially. But those people know how to market. They are pretty darn good at this. It's very, I have a lot of friends trying to make it with YouTube channels. If they're an influencer, like, a really hot girl who works out, some of them can do really well. They also do it on OnlyFans, but that's a whole other story altogether. But in general, not an easy road to become a profitable YouTube influencer. For every Mr. Beast, there are 100,000 others who don't make anything.
Yeah, true enough. True enough. Well, we are just about out of time today. So I want to thank you each for your thoughts. We lost Jason along the way. His battery died. So that's a shame that we didn't get his final thoughts. But from Paul, Bill, Tony, and Greg, we've had some great thoughts here. So thank you very much. And I'm going to hand it back to Eric.
Thank you so much, Buzzketeers. Fabulous discussion today. I'm looking forward to AI delivering a non-binary version of Maverick in Top Gun, or maybe allow me to replace Brad Pitt with Angelina Jolie in Fight Club soon. That will be most entertaining. I hadn't even thought about some of those opportunities. Super, super cool. And yeah, thank you, Bill, Paul, Tony, Greg, and Jason, wherever you are, out in the ethosphere, for that fantastic deep dive into the enticing yet murky waters of streaming today. And thank you to our audience for being here. We'll be back again with our next edition of The Buzz on December 11th. You can register to attend this and future episodes from our website at OTT.X.org. You can find our podcast also on Spotify, as I mentioned earlier. Do get out there and follow us. Let your colleagues and friends know so they can get in on the buzz as well. So that concludes today's episode. Looking forward to seeing you at our upcoming events. Stay tuned at OTT.X.org to learn more. We are proud to offer these sessions free to the OTT industry on behalf of OTT.X and our membership. If you're not yet a member, I do want to invite you to head out to the site and look into becoming one. We have a membership tiers for a broad range of organizations and professionals. Link is now in the chat, or soon will be, so you can check that out. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.